Welcome to Through the Hurricane. I'm Kathleen Kane, the first woman elected Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Have you ever looked down and seen the pieces of your life on the floor and wondered what happened? You haven't just been through a storm, you've been through a hurricane. Sometimes we think that we'll never have joy, we'll never have love again, we'll never have a normal life again. But Through the Hurricane will teach you that the power of love and resistance and the human mind can do anything. We all experience a hurricane, but the human spirit is indestructible. This is Through the Hurricane. Let's walk through the storm together. Welcome to Through the Hurricane. I'm your host, Kathleen Kane. She was never meant to just survive because everything that tried to break her wasn't her ending, it was her beginning. This episode is the messy, complicated, painful truth of a woman who has lived through more than most. Ali Shaw will talk about scars, healing, and everything in between. Sometimes we can't fathom that we've lived through the hurricane. We only know that we did and that we aren't the same person who walked in. Ali is an author, a speaker, and a mom. Ali, welcome.
Thank you, Kathleen. Such an honor to be with you today.
Give us a little bit more of your background because I like people to know that you know what you're talking about. And, we never give medical advice or anything like that. But I feel like people need to know that we have walked in their shoes, or you have walked in their shoes, or the stories of all of our guests, so that they can say, okay, if she did it this way, let me try. Or if she made it through, I could make it through too. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Certainly. So I love that you said that we can't provide medical advice or therapeutic advice. We can really only share, how our journey has helped us, moved us forward. And honestly, I think, my traumatic journey really had a lot to do with passion and purpose. Honestly, they were the main characters in my life. And that was the dynamic duo that always had me moving forward no matter what trauma was trying to set me back.
You have such an incredible, compound, never-ending story, it feels like. And sometimes I think that people are like, okay, well, I did have this storm, and then I had another one, and then another one, and then another one. So I feel like your story is going to resonate with a lot of people. But before we get into that, tell me just a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Mother and father. Do you have any siblings? Are you married?
Yeah, so I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia. Wonderful family, mother and father, and a sister. She and I are Irish twins, 11 months apart, very close. And really wonderful, normal childhood. Played in the marching band, and was a lifelong lover of music in a lot of different forms. So that's kind of where my story started.
Wonderful. And I also heard that you were an opera singer.
Yes, so that was my dream. Yeah, my mother really nurtured my love of music and discovered opera in high school, and that was where I started. Yes,
that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you are an author of 2 books or 3? 2 books.
So first edition and second edition of a memoir. And then this fall, I'm releasing the first book in a 2-book series, which is a fiction project. So,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, your first book, as soon as I saw the title, I immediately loved it. Chasing Tigers in the Dark. Here it is here. Tell us a little bit about that title. What does that mean?
Okay, so it's a metaphor for facing the fundamental fear or fears that attempt to stunt our productivity and divert us from living abundantly. And I kind of have a cool story. I actually had an encounter with a baby tiger, if you'd like to hear about it.
Oh, I'd love to hear about it, because I was wondering whether there was a real tiger involved in this.
Yes, well, I've always been an animal lover, but during a very volatile time in my life, I was at this very interesting zoo. I don't even know if you could call it a zoo. It was very grassroots. The gentleman that owned it had trained tigers and lions for movies, and I was kind of lost, and literally and figuratively. And I had gone into this barn to find the bathroom. I was all alone in this barn, and there was this enclosure that looked like it was fit for a puppy. And there was a baby tiger roaming around in this enclosure. And Kathleen, I must have been crazy because I just hopped right on in there, sat down, and picked it up. And I literally do not know what I was thinking, except that, sometimes we have these impossible encounters in life, whether whether you label them good or bad, that teach us these fundamental lessons about what's possible, right?
Right.
And I was searching for a sign. I was, really trying to make a big decision in that moment. And that tiger helped me make the decision. It's pretty amazing.
What was the decision that you had to make, and how could a baby tiger help you do that? And I love the way that you said we have to watch for the signs, because what were the odds that you would walk into a bar with the tiger, and now you have, two books with a tiger metaphor, and apparently it helped you make a decision that you really were searching for an answer.
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. I have been married twice, and so my first marriage was in a really bad place in that moment. And I think we both settled. We both had unresolved trauma that was, kind of pulling us down. And I knew I needed to leave the marriage, and it was a very, very difficult decision to make. And I decided ultimately to leave in that moment. I didn't leave in the moment, but made the decision that I was going to start the process. So,
how did the tiger figure into all of that?
I guess, I knew I was going to have to move. And I was working as an opera singer and as a music teacher. And I knew that when I moved, I was not going to be able to continue in that field. And so I think I had a lot of doubt because my background was so specific. I wasn't sure how I would do it. And you're going to love this part of the story. So I ended up leaving, and I had to cast a wide net, to be able to find work. And I was hired as the client services director to an intellectual property law firm. So I know you were an attorney. And so It was the most absurd job I had ever been offered. But you know what? It was one that I probably loved just as much as opera, if not more, because it allowed me to use a skill set and a passion that I wasn't using at that time, which was people.
Yeah, that you probably didn't even know you had, really.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. So it built my confidence because I didn't think I could do anything but music. So
that's
great.
Amazing. And maybe you jumping into the lion's den, basically, or the tiger's den, gave you that confidence that, you know what, you went and did something that you didn't expect, that you probably, if you thought of, you wouldn't have done, and you realized that you did it. And were you fearless in that cage with that enclosure, or were you, just petting him like a puppy?
Yeah, I was petting him like a puppy. I don't know. It was so strange, I guess. I don't know. I guess you would think an animal that small couldn't be ferocious, but I'm sure they probably could.
Yeah.
So I tried to be fearless.
Yeah. When you were naming your book, Chasing Tigers in the Dark, are tigers, we all think of that they're scary, and is that a metaphor for the trauma and the all of the things that you have put away and shoved down, and now you're kind of facing them? I mean, I know I felt like it was new to me. My father used to say, "Oh, you're the luckiest person I know, Kath. You're the luckiest person I know." And then all of a sudden, I became the unluckiest person that he knew, and I was in a world that I really didn't recognize because, we all have, law school was hard and I had to put myself through it, and that wasn't easy. We all have challenges, but that was something that I was completely in the dark of how to face. I had never faced, cruelty, and I had never faced such strong adversity and sometimes seemed like such hate. And so I was kind of in the dark about it, and I didn't know how to even get out of it. Is that what your book means, that you were in this space where you didn't know how to get out?
Well, your story is very unique, and my story is also very unique. I would say mine is because the trauma has existed in a lot of different categories. But the darkness that I felt, the solitude that I felt, chasing a tiger in the dark, in that moment, the tiger was a predator, because there are two predators in my history that I buried the stories for over 20 years because that's what I was built to do. And I did not want to continue to provide that example for my children. I wanted them to be able to assimilate the behavior of a predator before becoming a victim. And so the darkness that I felt, the uncertainty that I felt, was overpowered by my desire to bring light to my family and to other people that are stuck, as you've said, in the middle of their own storm.
Yeah. Did you feel at that time, before you kind of faced it and before you got it out, you talked about your children, did you feel like in some point you were pulling them down?
Yes, honestly. So the pandemic was a tricky time for me. It triggered a lot of things that I had buried, and I felt like I was not being a great mom to them because I was so distracted by all these things that were bubbling to the surface because of the solitude and quietness that we had to consider them. I don't know if you know, have you heard of Dr. Edith Egger, excuse me?
No.
Okay, so she is a Holocaust survivor, and she is a psychologist that specializes in PTSD recovery. And she's 98, she's still alive, but she has the most powerful quote. It is, "The concentration camp in our mind is basically the worst, and we hold the key in our pocket." And so she's talking about our internal power and how fear and these limiting beliefs can imprison us the way nothing else can. And that is what I experienced. I was living in a prison of shame and distraction and hate for myself. And I didn't want to be that person anymore. I wanted my children to see the best possible mother standing before them.
Yeah. You described yourself in your book as a unemployed, divorced, single mother, rape and incest survivor, and cancer survivor.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of trauma to go through. How old were you when the first trauma set on?
So I was almost 19. The month before I turned 19, I was a big planner, Kathleen. I knew I wanted to be an opera singer. I knew specifically who I wanted to marry, and I knew I wanted to have a girl and a boy. Okay. And the month before I turned 19, the man I thought I would marry was killed in a car accident.
Oh, no.
And it rocked my world. I had never experienced any kind of loss like that before. And not just that, months, like literally a few months later, I was diagnosed with a rare cancer that the tumor was in my neck and charting a course to my brain. Like, so many things happened like within a few months, and my life just did not feel like mine anymore. I didn't feel like myself. I had been so protected. And you've said before, that your life can change on a dime, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So.
How did you handle that? I mean, on our podcast, we like to tell people, that you can survive, but also kind of some tips on how to do it. And everyone is different. So when you would get up I'm sorry for your loss about, the man you thought you were going to marry. That's had to have been devastating at such a young age too.
Yeah.
19 is young to deal with that. And then a cancer diagnosis, that a rare cancer. How did you get yourself up in the morning?
Well, I had to fight for my life, and my father, he was a physician, and so he helped me with a lot of the physical things. We were able to try to combat some of the physical things, but I mean, I literally just I had to get up and fight. I couldn't think about, okay, what am I going to do 6 months from now? I had to think about, what am I going to do 6 minutes from now? Like, am I going to be able to withstand this chemo today? I mean, I was hospitalized. My fever spiked to 106. I mean, I was really, really ill. And so it kind of taught me, like, in each trauma that followed that experience, I just had to kind of be in the moment and do the best I could with each day that I had. The Tiger Healing Protocol is something I've developed within the last 4 years, because, like I was telling you with that beautiful quote about the concentration camp of our mind, it's, if we layer all of those traumas for 20 years, there's no way to get out of that without some serious strategy. And so, the beginning was just day by day. And then I came up with a more strategic way to move forward.
That is got, I mean, I don't think, and I didn't understand it either. I feel like you and I are a lot of like kind of overachievers. Had a plan, and darn it, we were going to carry through on that plan. And I think, what I've noticed is that plan just doesn't work out. You need to pivot, you need to reinvent, but first you need to survive it. And
Yes.
if you don't start peeling through the layers when it happens, and I think this would be what I would say to my children, or don't let things go, because they're going to pile up and eventually they are going to crush you. And I remember I had that crushing moment where it just kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And I thought I'd been through the worst of it, and I did it and I survived it and good for me. But then it just kept going. And then there was that moment where that was it. I was like, that's it. I'm waving the white flag.
Right.
You got me on that one.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough. But that, like, your COVID moment was basically right around the time that it happened to me as well. And that quiet and that solitude and that right down to the bottom kind of forces you to say, okay, what am I going to do now? Where's this going and how am I going to handle it? So you have an approach to healing. And
Yes.
I think that that's important to go through. I mean, some of the trauma that you've went through, I don't know if you want to get into the specifics of it, but you had a lot more happen even after your cancer.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. I think it's important because I don't want people to get stuck the way that I was. So just as chemotherapy ended and I had, we thought I was in remission, that I had a couple of scares. So, there were a couple of years in there that were just, a blur in a way. But once, it was right before I had my portacath removed, and I had begun, getting back into my opera education, and a family member who was more than twice my age had decided he was going to come and visit me. And he had reached out to my parents, and my parents were like, oh, just let him stay in your apartment. He can sleep on the sofa or whatever. And I was like, okay, I guess that's fine. And, so he comes, it all seems normal. I honestly thought that he was gay. And, we go to dinner, everything seems fine. And I was living by myself in a 1-bedroom apartment. And after dinner that night, he sexually assaulted me. And I mean, before that time, Kathleen, like I was about as innocent as you can imagine. Like, I basically had reverted to a childlike lifestyle where my parents were taking care of my physical needs, my emotional needs. Like, I did not feel like a woman in that moment. And for someone who is related to you to take advantage of you at your worst moment when you are recovering from cancer treatment. And I can't tell you what he did to my mind, and what I just felt like my identity literally was cracked in that moment. And I felt broken, honestly. And I felt abandoned by God, and it things just kept happening. It was more chronic illness. I had these dangerous precancerous cells in other parts of my body. Then I had more abuse that was sexual and emotional, and I just felt like I could not catch a break. And so one thing that I did within the last few years that I think really kind of helps with that label of brokenness, because I feel like a lot of people, whether they've been through one trauma, big T trauma, or whether it's complex trauma, we've all felt that brokenness. And so I adopted a kintsugi metaphor. Are you familiar with kintsugi?
I am not.
Okay, it's kind of cool. So it's a Japanese art for repairing broken pottery by filling the cracks with gold epoxy. So, we all carry these scars, right? And instead of seeing, the seen or unseen scar as, where shame exists, what if it's where the light gets in, right? So, the light of what we learn from these experiences gets in, transforms us, and then that gift of perspective is shined outwardly. And so it becomes an internal and an external kind of situation.
Yeah,
So kintsugi has been really helpful.
I saw that in your book, actually, in the Chasing Tigers in the Dark. And I loved the photo of it because when I looked at it, and I loved the way it was filled in with gold. It wasn't filled in with cement or something dark and ugly. It was filled in with something beautiful that people desire. And the broken pot with the all fixed up with gold was even more beautiful than the pot before it.
Yes,
Yeah,
agreed.
yeah, that was really cool. I wish I remembered that. But I think that that's a great metaphor for all of it, because I think that people need to know that sometimes there are things that you can fill in the cracks with that make your life better. Sometimes I actually thought to myself, I wonder if this is like a way the universe or God or whoever people think of is a way of getting me out of a situation that I really not don't belong in, but isn't the best course for my life. I mean,
Right.
I hated politics. I thought it was
Mhm.
filthy and disgusting and mean, and never wanted to be a part of it. And that's not what I ran for that office because that's the course you had to take for the job you wanted. But I was like, oh my God, this is so disgusting. I would literally come in after work and I'd walk through the garage and the laundry room was there. I would strip my suit off almost like it was
Oh,
like I needed a shower,
yeah, of course.
So sometimes I wonder whether that's the whole purpose of it, to kind of use the jaws of life to get you out of something that maybe you wouldn't have gotten yourself out of. Now that was my situation, but yours with, the just that awful trauma and the cruelty, and that is just a whole other animal that I can't even imagine. Even talking to so many survivors of sexual abuse, you can't put yourself in anyone else's place because it's just something I can't imagine. But did you
Yeah,
report the sexual assault or did you keep that to yourself?
I didn't.
Most
It's so
people don't.
funny. I honestly, I thought my family would be angry with me
Mhm.
because, I mean, I did tell my parents, but obviously, like the rest of the family, because he was part of our family, we used to do these elaborate family reunions. Like my great grandmother, she was over 100, and she would, we always went to her house for her birthday, and we did this every year, and those stopped. you
Oh,
know
yeah.
we just
Thank
the
God.
entire, yeah, I mean, the culture just felt very different, and I felt like part of it was my fault. And I just, I think sometimes as women, I was still, I like I told you, I didn't feel like a woman. I felt like a little girl. And so when I was presented with this situation that I didn't know how to get out of, I mean, it was just him and me, there was nobody else there. I didn't know how to use my voice. And it's my biggest regret. I wish I had had the strength or the courage to kick him out instead of allowing what happened to happen. And
But
yeah,
Allie, he also got you, I mean, at such a vulnerable moment. And that's, Some people are like, well, why did that happen? It happened because he saw that you were down and he saw that you were vulnerable, and you kind of had some of your growing up period from 19 to in your 20s kind of taken from you. With
Yeah.
the death of the man that you loved, and then you rolled right into like a terrible cancer diagnosis and trying to treat that. I mean, that took up your time. And I don't ever want you to feel like that you should have done something. And most people don't. And for those exact reasons, because they don't feel strong enough. They don't feel like anyone's going to believe them because it is one word against the other. And that's what those predators rely upon. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and that you don't, sometimes I don't feel like an adult, even at, I'm 59 years
Yeah.
old. So I get what you're saying. But there's, you know, please don't ever beat yourself up over that. That's now looking back, you can say it. But when we're in it and we're young like that, you do the best that you can.
You're right. And honestly, I was gifted joy later in life. I'm living my happiest life now. My husband even said this morning, he said, it breaks my heart to know all the things that you went through, but they led you to me. And so to me, it's like, could it all have been worth it to know that I ended up, my later years with, a wonderful man and wonderful children who are, doing so well. And it's just, it's interesting the progression of life and where it takes us.
It is interesting. And sometimes I look back at that too. If one little thing had changed, would I have missed out on all the great things that sometimes even happen while you're going through it? I mean, there's some joy. I remember sitting out on the yard of the jail, because that would be the only place I could feel like a normal human. I was outside. And I remember thinking, we started laughing with one of the other guests, I like to call them, one of the other
Yes.
guests. We were laughing so hard. And then we were like, my God, what are we doing? We're actually
Yeah.
laughing. But there are some moments of joy along the way. And would we have missed it if something had changed, if something was a little bit different? I mean, nobody wants it to happen, and we sure wish it was. But you're right. That's a great point. Would it have been different? I
Yeah.
don't know.
You're right.
Yeah.
You don't know. You
You
don't
don't
know.
know. And that's the
Hmm.
crazy thing about life. When you look back at it and you're like, that was such a wild ride. What part
Yes.
would I change, right? Because
Right.
really, do you feel like what happened to you, like the sexual assault, do you feel like that stole a love of opera singing from you? Did you divert to a different path after that?
So at that point, I was in New Orleans pursuing my master's degree. And the thing that was really upsetting to me was that it broke my love for that city. I was in love with that city, the culture, the food, the music, just, oh, it was, I felt so alive there. It was the perfect place to go after fighting cancer. I felt like I just was learning so much all the time. And I did not return to New Orleans for about 10 years after that assault. I couldn't do it. And and then my husband took me back, my now husband, and one of his daughters was with us, and I faced that apartment. I did a little exposure therapy of my own, and I faced that apartment, and I told myself in that moment, I am not going to allow someone to steal my relationship with anything that brought me joy in the past. I'm not going to give him the power anymore to do that. And so I didn't. I didn't. I just moved forward, and I just told myself, you have more to give this world, and you need to be the light and not allow somebody to continue to pull you back into the darkness.
That's amazing that you did that you went back and even back to that apartment and faced it like that. I mean, that takes a lot of guts.
It was tough, but it was what needed to happen.
Good for you. You have your approach to healing. And first, all during this time, after the sexual assault and the cancer and everything, all of the loss that you have suffered, and I know there's even more than that, you had this approach to healing. And I love that you talk about the generational silence. So let's talk about your approach to healing. I know that's what your new book is about. Tell us what that name is, and
Okay.
what the Tiger approach to healing is. And then I want to ask you about the generational silence, because I think you and I are almost around the same age. That is so true. So
It
true.
is.
How we grew up, and it leads us to into how we handle things and how we approach things.
It really does. Absolutely. All right. The Tiger acronym healing protocol. So this is something I kind of workshopped within the last 4 years. So the first edition came out right after COVID, and then I just released the second edition with the healing protocol a few weeks ago. So T stands for trust your intuition. So we've talked a lot about, safety, decision making. So definitely trust your intuition in those situations, but also with what we're passionate about in life. I told you that was one of the main characters, and I feel like passion can run parallel to hardship. We can compartmentalize hardship for beats of time while we're connecting to the thing that gets us out of bed in the morning. And that can change. I read a statistic recently that only 20% of the population knows what their passion truly is. So it's an opportunity for discovery, for curiosity. And so it gives us a positive focus when we are living in uncertainty with hardship. So that's T. I stands for invest in yourself. And so, this can mean a lot of different things, but for me, it was researching therapeutic resources. So I've tried a lot of things. Let's see, group therapy, one-on-one talk therapy. I mentioned exposure therapy, yoga nidra, which combines yoga and sound bath and trauma healing. Sorry, just lost my AirPod there. But the most helpful one was EMDR therapy. Are you familiar?
I am, yes.
So, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a non invasive approach to healing the trauma with bilateral eye movements, which sounds super clinical, but essentially it's taking our negative thoughts and transferring them into positive beliefs.
How does it do that, though?
Yeah, so
Tell me, when
first,
you were going through it, what was running through your mind, and where was there some sort of a transformation kind of at once where you were like, oh, I feel better, or was it just along the way?
so it's kind of controversial. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but for me, like the key was finding somebody that I trusted. So I had been with this practitioner for about a year before we even, went into EMDR. But the sensation that I felt, and it was really through the sexual assaults. It was mostly those two instances that I felt the most movement. But the eye movement process, I really had this feeling of euphoria. It was this feeling of hope like I'd never experienced it before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those experiences before EMDR still had me feeling like I was covered in shame. And when I was finished with it, I was like, okay, I can tell this story. I'm not embarrassed by this. I can move forward with this for the greater good. So that was kind of what I took away from it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know Lexi also tried EMDR, and it was
Oh,
a good help for her as well. So, and
oh,
at first
good.
when you hear about it, you're kind of like, how does that actually happen? But I love the way that it gives you that sense of euphoria, because to me, that's giving you a sense of hope and saying that you can do it. And
Yes.
then with that extra added layer of, it takes away that shame or that guilt or that shroud that you have there that's holding you down. Then I
Yes,
think that's unbelievable. That's a great gift.
it is.
Mhm.
I found it to be very powerful.
Good.
Okay, G stands for growing your character. And so we owned a restaurant business for a lot of years. And basically, in the restaurant business, you are presented with an opportunity to gossip about other people all the time. And I hated it. I just, oh gosh, it really just makes you feel so sad about humanity. So we ran across this kindness initiative called the Triple Filter. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay, so
I was in
basically,
politics. Of course, I didn't hear
oh,
about it.
okay, fair enough. So the triple filter basically gives you an opportunity to pause and ask yourself three questions, which are, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And so if you can't answer yes to all three questions, you would walk away or change the subject or call the person out. And so, I really felt like it gave us a step up with professionalism and just, in general, just doing the right thing, trying to be kind. And it's something that, we promoted within our business culture as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was good.
I saw a story on the news the other day. It's just this actually. I think it was a Domino's delivery man, and
Oh,
he was retiring soon. He was older. I think he was in his 70s, 78 maybe.
wow.
And the gentleman who ordered the pizza ordered, like, say, a Pepsi or something along with it. And
Mm-hmm.
they were out of Pepsi. So the delivery man stopped at the grocery store, bought him a Pepsi, and
Oh,
brought it back and said, "Oh, we were out, but I went and got you this." And the customer was like, "I can't believe you even did that. Why would you do that?" He goes,
oh,
"Well, you wanted it and I didn't want you to be disappointed." But just like that beautiful spirit of that man doing that. And I think that was such a good lesson for everyone. I love to hear the happy
yes.
news.
Oh, I do too. I love
Yeah.
happy stories like that. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's awesome. That's great. Okay, E is obvious, exercise self care, because we can't take care of others if we don't take care of ourselves. So I put together a comprehensive list of 6 self care categories and then several examples under each heading. So the goal with it was to be able to set an intentional morning routine so that, basically we are setting the tone for the day and it's not running us, right? We are running our own intention, our own plan for the day. And then finally, reinvent yourself often, which we've talked a little bit about with the story from being an opera singer to becoming a client services director for a law firm. So just kind of like leaning in. Sometimes reinvention is a necessity, and sometimes it's a choice. And if it's a necessity, it can seem really daunting, but in my case, it led me to my happiest life. When I started with the law firm, I was also enrolled in a leadership class that was one day a month, and that's where I met my second husband. And we met at the absolute perfect time, and we've been together for 15 years now. So sometimes those reinventions can lead us to our best personal and professional situations.
I
So,
read in your book that you went to the leadership class basically to kind of expand yourself and to
yes,
get out there a little bit more socially and to grow a little more within. And you obviously had no intentions of going and meeting your husband, but it
right.
just happened like that. That's a great story.
Yeah, yeah. I felt divine inspired somehow. It was pretty great. So,
That's wonderful. I wanted to ask you one
mhm.
quick thing too. You said start
Sure.
your day off with intention. How do you
Yes.
start your day off?
So for me, I usually the first hour of the day is I start with like a spiritual focus. So I do a devotion every day, but I also do. Are you familiar with the Calm app,
No. Oh, yes. Yes, I am.
the
I don't use it.
meditation app?
Hmm.
Well, I just started using it in 2026 regularly, and I do the former monk Jay Shetty.
Hmm.
Okay, so he does a wonderful series called The Daily J, and it usually has a beautiful story from his past, or a story about someone that moved him in some fashion. And it also allowed me to start a meditation practice, because I was becoming too much of a multitasker. I would do the dishes and I would, you know, half listen to what I was trying to listen to. And I needed to slow down. So I start with a spiritual focus, and then I I am obsessed with like the Wordle games. So I sit down, I do all of the Wordle games, and just try to, get my brain going for the day without, checking email, checking social media, just really trying to do a couple of things for myself.
Yeah.
So
That's a good lesson, and that's a good example. I like that. Sometimes I used to wonder how I even did half the things I did because we were moving at
yes,
90 miles an hour at all times. It was just
absolutely.
a constant juggling act. And did you ever really do one thing great? Probably not. I mean, you can't. So,
Yeah,
but when you stop
no,
and focus on this, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it right. And then I'll move on to that. It can wait. The next thing can
yes.
wait. That's a big thing. I never thought it could wait. I was always one of those people rushing through life because you never know whether tomorrow is going to be your last day. But
That's right.
you kind of miss something the day that you're in if you just try and do a million things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love your approach. I love the tiger approach because we all will think tiger. What was it that what was it that you said? What's a T mean again? And those are such practical, simple things that we can all grasp on. But I can't say enough about your book, by the way. I love
Oh,
it.
thank
I was
you.
telling you beforehand that I read a book from Anne Lamott. It's called Traveling Mercies, and I just love it. Every now and then I'll go back and read a chapter, but your book is an easy read. It's real, it's true, and it just gets right to the heart of things. And you can go back from chapter to chapter. But I saw that even after the cancer, after the loss, after the sexual assault, you feel like sometimes things are on a good path. And then bam, you get hit
Yeah.
with, what did you call it in your book? It was, you said it was like
Triple
the,
curveball.
yeah, the straw that broke the camel's back, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, enough is
Yeah.
enough. What
Yeah.
happened?
So the reason why I really felt compelled to put out a second edition was 2026 was very difficult for our family. My first husband died of a massive heart attack, and our children were 17 and 18 the day that he died, and he died on Valentine's Day. And 6 weeks later, we lost my father. And 2 weeks after that, my mom had a massive stroke. So it felt like all of our people were, leaving us one by one within a 2 months time. And thankfully my mother recovered. But I just, I had a lot of regrets with regard to my first husband. We both contributed to the demise of our marriage, but I had a lot of things that I should have said to him before he passed away. And the forgiveness piece was a big lesson for me. Something that, I talk to my kids about a lot because it's so important. You just really want to make sure that you're at peace with these important relationships because you never know when it's going to be the end.
Oh, that's the truth too. And I always say, you hold on to things like that. I mean, I was once asked by one of my sons, how can you forgive? How could you forgive? I mean, what, you just forgot the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing? And I said, you don't forget because you can't erase your mind, but you can
Right.
forgive because it
Yes.
could be, could be something that you contributed to, like you said, or it could be something that somebody just couldn't help. Or it doesn't really matter, even if it's Len Floyd was on our podcast, and he was shot in the face by a stranger, just a random act of violence, and he said that he forgave the guy because he had a mental illness, and he didn't set out to have one, and he felt a little empathy for the person, and I think that that's a big thing because it destroys not just that person, it destroys you, it destroys everyone
Yeah.
around you, and there's just no point in hanging on to it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's not just for the person that, you have the issue with it. It creates balance in your heart. It allows you to make peace with it. So
Right,
it's important.
exactly. And then I know
Hmm.
you were very close to your dad, and I lost my
Yes.
father too, and it's
Oh,
devastating. It's
it
really,
is.
my father
It
had
is.
dementia for so long, and it's not, he wasn't the father I knew during it, but he was
Yeah.
still there. And every now
Yeah.
and then, I could still talk to him. I could tell him anything because he wouldn't remember it after that. But and he still had such a great sense of humor. And every now and then he'd come
Yeah.
out with something profound, and he was still there. So, and he died in the middle of the night. We weren't even with him. But I
Oh,
know that that was, and he and I were very close. When everything was happening with me, I still had to go and make public appearances. And sometimes I would just be like, Dad, I can't. I just can't. I can't go
yeah.
and put on a happy face. He's like, oh, yes, you can. Go get dressed. I'm going to go home, put a suit on, pick me up, and we're going together. And he would go so many places
Oh,
with me. Just all I had to do was look across the room and see that my father was there. Talk
that's
about being a little
beautiful.
girl. Your father's there,
Yeah,
everything's okay. But I know you were
absolutely.
close with your dad, and that had to have been a hard thing.
It was. But what was really beautiful about it was we took him to Las Vegas about 6 weeks before he passed away. He really loved Vegas, the whole like, he was a foodie. He loved the culture of the restaurants and the shows and the whole thing. And he was really struggling. He was at the end stage lung cancer. And, he, there was a medical emergency on the plane on the way home, and he toted that oxygen tank to the back of the plane. I got to help him by putting the mask on him, and he cared for a woman that was unconscious on our plane.
Wow.
Like, as a doctor, again, him being able to care for someone like that again, just, it gave me so much pride for him. And then obviously it was probably just a great reminder to him of the impact that he had in this world. But yeah, holding his hand as he took his final breaths was a major gift, because he held my hand every single time I went through chemotherapy. So, it was
I
beautiful.
know. You don't get over
Hmm.
it. You
You
just don't.
don't.
Yeah,
You
right.
don't. You just have to be thankful for the time that you were given.
Right. I totally
Yeah.
agree. Now let's
Yeah.
get to our subject of generational silence. Because,
Yes.
how old was your dad when he passed away?
He was 76.
76. Okay, a little bit younger than mine. They were like in their early, my mother and father died a year apart. They were in their early
Oh,
80s. But
wow.
it's about the same generation. So tell us what your theory is on generational silence.
You know, um, so both of my grandfathers returned from World War II. And I feel like, not just with veterans, I've seen this, with a lot of different populations, that there's either this tendency to run or a tendency to numb. So, and I'm not just talking about with alcohol, it could be consumerism, it could be food, it could be inappropriate relationships. I mean, who knows? But I just think that there are these unhealthy patterns. And the one that I learned about within the last 4 years is that my paternal grandfather actually became a missing person for several weeks. He actually was found in Washington, D.C. at a baseball game while my grandmother was raising their three sons. And it was pretty obvious that he was having a mental health spiral, unable to, cope with what he had seen overseas. And the saddest thing about it, Kathleen, is that he died when he was 60 years old, 6 months before I was even born. So I think about that story and what he held so close that he felt like he couldn't burden his family with, with these stories or these scenes that, that nobody should see. And it just really made me want to normalize the conversation, because nobody should have to sit with this, you know, shame or fear or uncertainty. We should be having more conversations about it, because everybody has a story, everybody has experienced something. And so I just really felt like, and honestly, with my two uncles, when I made a post about my grandfather, about this missing person story. We had found some newspaper clippings and it was really interesting. And I honestly didn't think they would care. They were so frustrated with me that I had posted something about him and mentioned PTSD. And it just proved my point. I mean, how many generations have to go through with this behavior of pushing it under the rug instead of just growing through the experience and learning something together, you
Right.
know?
And I think that you're such a great speaker on that subject. And I know you're a motivational speaker and you go and give lectures everywhere on this topic. And I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, everybody holds it inside for some reason. And,
Yeah.
my mother's generation held it inside, and my grandmother's was even worse. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
same thing. Her husband returned home from World War II. He was 36 years old. He was 34 when he came home, 6 kids.
Oh,
2 years later, he dies, within 3 days of pneumonia complications from malaria that he got at the war.
Oh,
But
gosh.
the story goes, and at first I was, kind of like, well, this is a cool story. This is how tough the women in our family are. But then I realized, wait a second. The story goes is that they had, my grandmother takes all, the 6 kids. My mother was the youngest. She was 5. Takes them to the funeral, and they have this beautiful military burial at the cemetery. And my one aunt remembers the shotguns going off and taps playing. And
Oh,
she said, but then she remembers going home and my grandmother coming out like 2 hours later, all of her husband's, my grandfather's clothes, took them down to the Salvation Army, cleaned out the closet, and literally never spoke of him again, ever, ever. I
wow.
was very close to my grandmother. She was like my second mother. She never
Yeah.
spoke of him until 2 years before she died. She said, I had a dream last night that my husband was sitting on a park bench waiting for me. And we were
Oh,
shocked because she had never mentioned anything like that before. And we always wanted to know more about him and what happened. She never dated, she never remarried, but we were too afraid to even ask her because that's the way it
yeah.
was. And my mother then, basically, we grew up in the era of children are meant to be seen and not heard,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And do
Oh,
not
I've
speak
heard
until you're
it.
spoken
Yes,
to.
that's right.
So
You're
we kind
exactly
of grew up
right.
in that era, and that doesn't help
Yeah.
because we had that same kind of, as um, theory or mentality towards mental health that it's a stigma, and it's not.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's a part of life.
It
It's just life
is.
getting to you, that's all, and figuring out how to fight your way back is really what we should call it.
Right.
Let's change the name.
Right. I
Okay?
mean, and Kathleen, how could someone not have anxiety or depression after coming back from war? I mean, I can't
Agreed.
even imagine.
Agreed.
So, that's why it needs to be normalized. It's, these veterans come back and gosh, bless their
Oh,
hearts. They're not, they don't re-enter society gracefully. They struggle.
yes,
And
it
it's
breaks my
just,
heart.
oh gosh, me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
And I really
Yeah.
do think we should start with, I mean, I love the way you're saying, let's normalize it because it should be. And honestly, I think
Yeah.
the good news is that like the generation of the 20s and say early 30s, um, my nieces and nephews always joked, if you didn't have a therapist, you were not in the cool crowd.
Right. Right.
So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe things are changing. But I think for
Right.
people our age and a little bit older, there's a lot more work to be done.
Absolutely.
Allie, I had such an interesting conversation with you today, and I love that you have found your passion and that you've devoted it to helping other people. And I truly believe that more people should step forward and tell their stories. And that's what we like to do on this podcast, because I think by knowing that your doctor had a story, or your lawyer had a story, your mailman had a story, your sister has one, everyone has one. I think by us all knowing that, we become more of a community of people who say, we're not out there alone. We have a story to tell. And you know what? Damn it, we're going to tell it because
Yes.
we do have to put our own oxygen mask on before we can attempt to help others. And I'm so happy to see where you are in this life. I think you're such a hope and an inspiration to people coming when you're in that eye of the storm. It's dark. You know that it's dark,
Yes,
and
it
you
is.
may know there's a way out, but you don't know how to do it, number one. And you have helped us learn how to do it with your tiger metaphor. And number two, you need to know that there's something worth living for, that there's
That's
hope. You
exactly right.
can love someone again. You can heal from what you think was a devastating incident. It didn't break you. like I
That's
said,
right.
you don't know how you did it, but you know you did it, and you should feel proud that you were strong enough. And then for you to go forward and talk to other people, I really find you an inspiration. So I appreciate having you on today.
Thank you. Well, our conversation brought me so much energy. It's just nice to connect in a positive manner over the things that make us stronger.
Yes, exactly. Now tell us, where can we find your books?
You can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you buy books. And if you don't mind me saying, in September, I will be releasing a novel that shines a spotlight on the human trafficking pandemic. And so it's going to be very entertaining. It is a thriller, but it will allow us to learn more about that important situation in our world that affects 27 million people.
I completely agree with you. I can't wait to. What is the name of that novel?
I stayed with the tiger theme. It's called Tiger Eye.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading that as well. And everyone, I got mine on Amazon, was here within 2 days. It's fantastic. It's a good read, so I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thanks for being a part of this episode. If it meant something to you, or if you know someone who might need help, please share or like us on Facebook, or follow us on Instagram or Facebook. We appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Through the Hurricane. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.